Welcome to another episode of the Sparkles of Gold Astrology Manifesto podcast. My name is Nicolas Polymanakos, aka Sparkles of Gold. Today's episode's a little different. There's two special guests. I recorded this with Gray Crawford and Genie Desert late January 7th. Pretty much putting this up as soon as I can. We talk about some of the transits for the week of January 8th and into the rest of January, and then just kind of did this informally and talked about a couple other things. We just went with the flow, nothing formal. So I hope you enjoyed the episode. If you hit up the show notes or the bio on YouTube, you can see links to who they are and where you can find out more information about them. Of course, you can find out more information about me at sparklesofgold.com. I got a big YouTube live stream coming in January 11th at 1 p.m. Pacific. More about that another time. Please enjoy this special episode. Welcome to another episode of the Sparkles of Gold Astrology Manifesto podcast. My name is Nicolas Polymanakos, a.k.a. Sparkles of Gold. Today, I'm not alone. I have two special guests with me today I'm very excited about. My first guest...
Hi, I'm Genie Desert.
Hi, Genie.
Hi, Nicholas.
And second special guest...
I'm Gray Crawford.
Hi, Gray.
Hi.
Hi.
Thanks for showing up and recording this with us.
Yes, I think we...
I'm bringing pizza.
Yeah, I did. I brought pizza. Thanks to my brother at Vera's Restaurant in downtown Ballard, Seattle. There's a quick ad. They're the unofficial sponsor of this episode now. Thanks.
It's good pizza.
Yeah, thanks to my brother Bill, or Vasilios, as in Greek. Vas. Thanks, Vas. You're not going to listen to this, but and just to say, I'll be honest. It's my brother's restaurant, but it's a restaurant called Vera's, and it actually was a diner, and it's been in my family's world since 1985. I grew up working in the restaurant diner business. Okay, that's for some of you who always ask about my other parts of my life. So yeah, we're getting together here sort of on an informal way. We're going to talk about some transits, and anything else that happens, we're going to go with the flow. It is Saturday, January 7th, and we are in a Leo moonish. It's like 9:12. I just pulled up on my chart. We have a sort of raw structure to start off with. I'll just say off the bat, we've had two interesting things happen within the last day and a half, I would say. Mm-hmm. And that is the full moon that happened in Cancer. And within hours earlier this morning on the Saturday, January 7th, we had Mercury conjunct the Sun, cazimi with the Sun. So I was going to say the transits are hot, but there's a lot that's happened in the last day and a half. And so I don't know what y'all think about that. What about you, Gray? What do you got going in your head?
Yeah, it has been from the standpoint of the full moon is always, the peak moment of the lunar month, and for that full moon to happen pretty much at the same time as the Mercury retrograde conjunction with the Sun is very powerful. That Mercury at this point is in the underworld, it's invisible. It's a powerful reseeding of new ideas and sort of reception of new direction in our lives that we often pick up at this time, but it's often a very interior sort of feeling and contemplative process. And so for a full moon to be happening at the same time, a full moon in Cancer, the moon's own sign, it's very electric is something I've been thinking about, especially because the full moon was sextile Uranus, and the Mercury was trining Uranus.
Mm-hmm. Yep. What about you, Jeannie? Like, how did full moon treat you last day and a half?
And particularly the Mercury cazimi. Like today, I really like Mercury cazimis, and I feel like today was another great Mercury cazimi. Just sort of, for me, just really. I feel so much more like open in my communications with people, and I'm just really touching bases with lots of people. It seems to happen every Mercury cazimi for me. So, yeah, there's just that Mercury being brought up into the heart of the Sun. It's really, I feel like it's a renewal of renews Mercury. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's two things in the astrology world outside of the astrology world, people aren't astrologers. The two things that get talked about the most is Mercury retrograde, and I think the next one, I mean, full moon or something, right? But I think a bigger aspect, Saturn return. Like, I think that's another thing. So, it's interesting from that point of view. I think more and more people, when they listen to podcasts or videos, are starting to learn about this midpoint in the Mercury retrograde cycle when Mercury's together with the sun. Because the stigma Mercury retrograde gets, don't do this, don't sign that, your car is going to break down, and that stuff happens. But for people who are just learning astrology, I think it's almost like I'm PRing for Hermes right now. I'm almost promoting Mercury here to go like, oh, this midpoint is huge in the sense of like, okay, you can do things. People are going to do things during Mercury retrograde, but this particular point that we're talking about is a time to actually, if you want to plan out and to do something, for the most part, it's kind of the sweet spot in the retrograde cycle.
Definitely.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I know people who put out newsletters this morning, even though it was Saturday, but it doesn't have to be, I think, sometimes something dramatic, something that maybe you said, Genie, actually, which I think found interesting what you said, considering this full moon in Cancer and what you think the types of conversations that have happened. We're not talking about things getting signed or whatever. We're just talking about conversations, the types of things of connecting.
Yeah, connecting.
Yeah.
Yeah, big time. Yeah.
So... yeah, and on that emotional level too, that Cancer moon is, in a sense, I don't know, not fueling it, but it's the flavor. It's the flavor. Even though it's happening in Capricorn, it's unavoidable. So I think there are feelings that have been expressed and connections, So.
Yeah, definitely. It's been very connective. Yeah, very connective past couple of days. Yeah.
Yeah, and I know, Gray, you wrote a great piece on all this on your blog. If you can help me out here, Gray, because there was something else. I particularly brought Chiron into this, even though it's not the most nicest thing involved in this, because Chiron's in a cardinal place. It kind of has this funny aspect with the moon, so that's part of it, though. But I think the other thing here, and Gray, maybe you could talk about Uranus's connection to Mercury here.
Yeah, the Mercury is basically trining Uranus right at the same time. I think the actual trine is tomorrow. We're recording this on January 7th. I believe it's January 8th that there's the exact trine for Mercury with Uranus. But it's going to be a big theme of not just this Mercury retrograde, but actually the first three retrogrades of 2023. They're all in Earth signs. So this one is... the most powerful one, actually, to me is this moment that we're in right now, because it's the rebirth of Mercury with the sun, where Mercury's really is empowered in some ways. It is a more powerful time for doing mercurial things within the whole Mercury retrograde phase. But especially in that concept of picking up insights, picking up new ideas, and the way Mercury can also help purge and release us from old habits and old patterns that we need to really kind of let go of and bring in something new. A lot of times people talk about Mercury retrograde being like a time of review. And I think that sometimes happens, but I personally disagree with that. I think that's, in my opinion, way too simplistic. And there's all the time people are doing really new starting to do new things and develop new ideas during Mercury retrograde. It isn't always review. Review can be in one aspect of it, but you don't want to hold yourself back from doing things. Somebody actually texted me yesterday like, I just saw this new place we could live in, and should I not sign the lease because Mercury's retrograde? If you found some amazing place to live right now and you can sign a lease and secure that place, you want to do that. And you don't want to be like, oh my God, Mercury's retrograde, I can't do it. That's a mistake to me. But the trine to Uranus just really makes it very, especially innovative. And later in the year, the next one will be Mercury retrograde in Taurus. It will station retrograde close to Uranus. And then later in the year, there's going to be one in Virgo where it stations fairly close to a trine with Uranus. So it's interesting. This is the most intense of the three, but it's going to be something we keep coming to all year round. And so there's something really interesting to me when you mentioned my blog, graycrawford.net, and I did write something on Mercury retrograde in Capricorn. One thing we can think about Mercury in earth signs like Capricorn, Taurus, Virgo, it does take us more into the body, bodily senses, information we're carrying in our bodies. So that's one thing. And so we could also think about health routines and really breaking with a Uranus trine, like breaking free into new, better, healthy routines and how you're using time and that sort of thing. What's great about the earth signs, this one and the other ones this year will be, it's very actually practical and pragmatic and really initiating changes that are going to make a difference, like with your business or making money, how you're promoting yourself, all these types of things, all these like structures and routines you have in your life in very practical ways can really get renovated and improved during these Mercury retrograde times.
Yes. Yeah. Rick Levine's popping up in my brain right now, and he shout out to you, Rick, because not too long ago you were talking about Mercury retrograde, what happens, and you're saying that it's actually intensified. There's the things we hear about the review process, but he talks about like it's more intensified. And so when let's say the typical Mercury retrograde things happen, it's kind of an overload actually from his point of view. It's an overload of Mercury depending on the person or the situation. So we're not talking about review, but it's actually an intensified Mercury during retrogrades. It's actually...
I totally agree. So if you have, for example, if you can focus on a research project or a writing project, you can do really deep work during a Mercury retrograde. Because it is, like, I agree with that totally. It's totally intensified. Which can be trouble, and that's why you do have to be careful. But it's not like it's all bad.
Yeah, totally. I'm sort of going to go off track here for a second to bring up Mercury. And I don't know I think you guys are all cool with this. We should say our personal Mercuries just because. Okay, so I'll start. I'm Mercury in Gemini. What about you, Genie?
Mercury in Sagittarius.
Oh, the way you said that. There's something about the way you said that. Mercury in Sagittarius. What about you, Greg?
Mercury in Pisces, which is the Mercury that most people are really envious of, I think, the most.
And mine's second.
Yeah, but I mean, most people... people really get down on Mercury and Pisces because I think it's really envy.
Yeah, and I'm probably second in line there, I'd say.
Yeah. Mercury Sag, it's a pretty good one.
Yeah, it's right up there.
I think I have the worst Mercury of them all.
You definitely have the worst
Mercury in Gemini.
Yeah. No one wants that. No.
It gets me in trouble. One thing I will say about having this Mercury is like, there's the words, there's my voice right now, but it's, I think, a small part of it. Obviously, there's the internal dialogue, but beyond that is, I'll just be real here. I can fucking read people's minds. I can do it.
Yeah.
I have to stop myself sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And I have my moments where I think I am God. And that's the moments when I actually don't know anything and the universe puts me down on my ass. But honoring my Mercury and the way it flows, it's just a fine line of knowing a lot and everything. And obviously I can talk a lot. People who know my YouTube channel, my podcast, I can rattle off stuff, but there's so much more that I don't say. And the reason is because it is sometimes the clearest truths that if it's involved somebody else and I'm picking up on the psychic vibes, I shouldn't say out loud. And I've had to learn to hold that. What about you as a Mercury Sag? How's things flow with you?
Well, my Mercury in Sag likes to speak through fire. So, and I mean literal fire. So I'm a gold and silversmith, and I feel like that's my language that Mercury likes to express through. Yeah, much better with fire than with words. Yeah, primary language. Yeah.
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 And Gray's like, well, I'm not speaking for Gray. Gray, I'm not reading your mind, by the way.
Well, I like what you said about feeling like you're God, because having Mercury in Gemini, it is Mercury in its own domicile, and so it is the most direct Mercury there is besides Virgo. Virgo's the other one. So yeah, there's a quality like that, I think, that can come through when a planet's in its own place. It's like you're getting that direct hit of Hermes Mercury is coming like straight through. It's like a straight shot of Mercury.
It sounds intense, but also I covered it because I would much prefer.
Yeah, and also being in an air sign, because Mercury, Virgo. Let me just take a moment here to talk about how great Mercury and Gemini is, because I feel like people tend to talk about Mercury and Virgo being the best one. It's great. It's exaltation and it's domicile. But we want to remember there is a thing called triplicity rulership too, and so Mercury and Gemini is the one that has triplicity and domicile, and that is actually significant.
I agree.
I don't feel you hear people bring in that triplicity association as much with with Mercury.
No, I definitely
and Gemini.
think that Mercury and Gemini, I much would prefer to have that over Virgo. Yeah.
Yeah, and hopefully now that I've talked up Mercury and Gemini, I won't make everybody jealous by going into the meaning of an experience of having Mercury and Pisces, because people definitely are pretty envious of us, I think. It's got its challenges. It's in, I like to say it's the inversion of Mercury. I don't like the detriment term, not because it's negative. It is negative. I just don't think detriment to me is just accurate about the experience. And the idea of inversion I like better because it's more about the oppositional quality. It's Mercury in the sign opposite its home. And it's also the fall of Mercury's, because so Mercury in Pisces is the only one that has both those, detriment and fall. But it is ruled by Jupiter, just like Mercury in Sagittarius is. So it's a very creative, far-seeing Mercury. It's actually a Mercury that can also, I think, read into people and read emotional minds and what's going on, because it's a water Mercury. The water Mercuries really pick up the feelings and things going on in the room and situation that aren't really being expressed or talked about, and they themselves, Mercury and Pisces, have a difficulty even probably putting it into words. It tends to be easier for Mercury and Pisces to write something, use that quality they have to write something creative or imaginative or poetic, which Mercury and Pisces is really good at. Sometimes not as good at then, just some more kind of mundane, detailed type of stuff, yeah.
I actually wonder, though, if Mercury in Pisces is better at communicating than Mercury in Sagittarius. Like, I feel like there's more of an access to, a poetic language that you have, and you can just sort of, I think you're very, you seem to be able to express yourself very well.
Well, that's very generous of you.
Yeah.
I do think Mercury in Sagittarius is very poetic also. I've noticed some really powerful writers, in particular, I think prose writing seems to really strike out to me sometimes with Mercury and Sag. I think maybe because it's a fire sign, and that prose style of really writing something that really kind of hits in this fiery way. And Mercury and Pisces is maybe better at the sort of poetic, weaving in type of quality of writing. But they're both really great at writing. In both cases.
Anybody listening to this, it's, if you are going to pick up the three Mercuries here and then how we express ourselves, I actually think you can catch a little bit, especially with you, Gray, when, you speaking, you're the one with Mercury and Pisces, I think a lot of people who know of you, know your blog and how you write. And it's, we're not talking about any other aspects to our Mercuries, right? But it's pretty obvious how it comes across. And I also found it interesting, too, earlier, Genie, about how you're expressing your Mercury. It wasn't just through your words in your head, but it was through your physicalness and through something else of fire.
Yeah.
Like things need to be, the words need to be put out into the world and then forged or something in the fire. And put out there, but again, let's not forget the questing quality of Mercury and Sagittarius. So I can see what you're saying about fire, and it, the things that you have to know and research and to put into yourself and to prepare yourself for what you are constructing through your body and through the material world. Yes.
Yeah, but it also feels like a language. Like I guess gold and silversmithing feels like a language, and I feel like that's something that people overlook. Just that there are different languages, I guess, within art forms. Like there's different art forms that are in themselves languages, and the visual arts is very much a language in itself. So yeah, I guess that's what I was kind of getting at with that.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking. And, as Grace said earlier, too, Mercury and Pisces, too, it's not just the words, but feeling what you're feeling with other people in the room, let's say. And that's another form of a language, or another language or tongue. Lengua, as they say in Spanish. When you say lengua, it also means language, and it accentuates the different ways of hearing things and communicating things. So, do you guys want to say anything else to that? We can keep going.
Yeah, I think what's interesting is with Mercury in Sagittarius and Mercury in Pisces, which are the two placements of Mercury that are said to be difficult or challenging in terms of essential dignity. Writing really comes through. There's something about creating something. I just think it's interesting. I think it's one of those things where necessity is like the mother of invention, or when you have a placement that might be challenging in some ways, as you live with that placement, you really develop a really unique way in relationship with that planet. And it's just something I notice. Mercury in Pisces and Mercury in Sagittarius are just often extremely creative people, and they create things that you don't see other people doing. They're doing something very creative, and in ways that are hard to even fully encompass in words. Like Genie, you taking a blowtorch and melting down metal, and then forming these really beautiful, really kind of fine art, high art, jewelry, and other images that are also, astrologically timed. It's hard to even put into words. Words are going to be inadequate to describe what that is. Best you could do is something like akin to like a modern Orphic hymn, or something like praising like the god that's that's making its home in this object you created. It's sort of beyond words in a way.
Did you just equate her work to an Orphic hymn? I mean, that is some serious Mercury power you just did there, Gray.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. Thank you.
Sorry, I had to say that because it's true. He's not faking it, Genie.
No, but there is the lengthy process of the making process. It's very lengthy, and it is a meditation, and it exists outside of words. And there's something particularly poetic about that. Because I think a lot of the times we're really very in our heads, and we're going around, like the words are going around and around in our heads, and we're like constantly speaking them, writing them. But then to get into a place where the words are gone, you've taken the words away, and you're in this meditation, in this process, in the moment with these things that you're creating, and that you're looking to, you're inviting the gods, the spirits into them, or you're looking to awaken because they already exist within the materials, and it's just, there's poetry within that doesn't need words. Yeah.
That's a good way to put it, also, like awakening the spirit that's already within it.
Yeah, because they already exist within the materials. They exist within the stones. They exist within the metals. And it's an invitation,
Well, we started talking about this because of the Mercury retrograde, and look where we ended up. See, people listening, Mercury retrograde isn't bad. See what types of conversations that happen. You start to flesh things out, bring things in. I think it gets a bad rap. I love Mercury retrogrades. I have a tendency to put things to sell, and I sell them. It's when I clean my closets out. But, also too, maybe we can wrap this part up. We can talk about whatever. But, also some of my best ideas that I've had in my world, I came to figure out over time as an astrologer and then in my own personal life, like some of my best ideas came during the retrograde cycle, and some of the implementation of my ideas, even if it wasn't dramatic, happened during Cazimi, during the conjunctions, and I feel really good about it. When I see Mercury retrograde coming on the calendar, I still get the feeling like, okay, shit, here we go. But it turns into something like, all right, I actually get prepared. Like I'm like more focused, and even if it doesn't feel like or it's like completely on point, I am very much more aware out of any time, and I get I don't know, I personally get excited for it. So.
I kind of wonder with the like sort of fear of Mercury retrograde is kind of like this sort of fear of the the underworld, like because Mercury is going into the underworld and. We just have like a fear of, Western society has a fear of death. So there's this kind of, this fear of that whole mythology. But if you step outside of that, there's something very amazing about Mercury going into the underworld. There's so much that we can recover from the underworld. There's connections we can make with our ancestors. There's just so much to that Mercury can help us access. Yeah.
I think not just the underworld, but maybe it's a fear of losing control.
Yeah.
I think because sometimes when I hear people talk about what they don't like about Mercury retrograde, it makes me think about what I'm not trying to do all the time, just because, sure, I like anybody, I'm trying to control things to a certain extent, but I wonder sometimes if there are some people that want everything to be planned, everything's planned out, everything's strategizing. They're trying to constantly be very ambitious and hit all these goals and moving really fast and be like the master of their domain and if you're doing that and that's the way you expect things to be all the time and that's always going to work according to plan, then yeah, I think Mercury retrograde can shake that up because it's very intensified. But if you're tending to more just kind of want to relate to what's going on, and I think that's where us all having maybe mutable Mercuries comes in, because mutable placements can more like relate and adapt and be flexible and maybe think, oh, this is what I wanted to do, but this is just not the vibe or what's actually, things are not unfolding this way, and I need to actually adjust and do something different, and I'm not going to be incapacitated because of that. I just have to adapt to this. I have to respond and do something different. And because I think that's normally the way I kind of am, I think that's why I don't have issues with Mercury retrograde normally. I normally have nothing difficult happen to me, honestly, during them. I actually like them. I don't find them difficult at all.
And what you're speaking to is the diurnal nature of our society. Our society is very, very diurnal. It's very much, we have a very day-orientated, we live in a day-orientated society. So, when Mercury goes into the netherworld, it's really disruptive to that day-orientated society. And I think that's just really speaking to the unbalance of the world we're living in. So. Yeah,
it's so fascinating at this point because I think it is reflected in culture. The avoidance of regeneration and death, and how we see it in many different ways, and that's what the Mercury retrograde cycle is doing every single time. And if the Cazimi moment and the conjunction moment of going through, because then in a sense Mercury's being burnt down to its core of his purity into nothingness to be reborn. Just the death and rebirth story in general, whether it's with Mercury or any other planet or story, whatever, is I think it goes into that surface language by the rest of the world of the two things I mentioned earlier, the Saturn return and Mercury retrograde, the two things that are most commonly talked about. And maybe the narrative could be changed here to embrace that Cazimi day or night, because it's the switching. We're going into, moving through that place of letting go completely. And it is one of the hallmark or the marks of Western societies of the fear of death, the fear of you mentioned control, and you're having to surrender. And I think, let's say if other planetary aspects, other planets are bringing, I mean, Saturn's a whole other thing with mortality and death, right? And mind you, I fear that shit the way Saturn does it. But if we come to a place with Mercury, I think it could be easily digested and integrated into oneself as an entryway to understanding one's connection with death and letting go. Then, because of the amount of times it happens a year, on average 3 times a year, right? It's constantly there. So it's funny. I'm saying the entry, getting used to it, is like, what does Mercury do? You know, it's going back and forth, and it's leading people through, you know, to the underworld and coming back, and doing it with its swiftness and its cleverness and the trickster quality too of a retrograde. There's those things of, can you see behind the meaning of the words or the computer breaking down and the reasons for anything happening? Well, later on, a lot of the times we're seeing that metaphorical, symbolic death for whatever the situation is. Like, oh, they needed to happen because that thing wasn't working actually anymore. Or the conversation I just had on this new moon, you know, or when the retrograde started, when it was conjunct Venus, and what it is now, these conversations that have happened in the last couple of weeks, at first they might have sounded like whatever, so then you realize, oh, there might have been some actually tough, serious conversations that happened because of Mercury and Capricorn, and they needed to go down. But at first it was with fear, or because it was dealt with pure reality of a Capricorn being ruled by Saturn. But then you realize after, I needed to have those conversations, I needed to do those things. And, you know, one's afraid, one in particular. I totally agree about our mutable Mercuries. Remind me when we get off here that I have to grab that handle. I can't. I have to grab the IG handle of mutable Mercuries.
Oh, okay. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So this is going to go out, and by the time everybody's going to listen to this, we have it. Okay. So, but anyway. So
that's interesting though, because with there's a couple of things. It's the mutable Mercuries we have, but this is Mercury retrograde in Capricorn as the cardinal sign, and you have an air Mercury, you have a fire Mercury, I have a water Mercury.
And then we have Mercury and an Earth sign. Yeah.
So the difference that, this is one that none of us have here.
Yeah.
But we'll later have a Mercury retrograde in a mutable sign. The cardinal quality of this, you know, one thing that makes me think about is very much like initiation and pioneering things. And I think it's a really great timing for being at the beginning of 2023, which is just very common place to start thinking about, what do I want to achieve this year? And that pragmatic quality and the fact that it's ruled by Saturn, like you were just talking about, and it's a very strong Saturn in its own sign of Aquarius that's ruling the Mercury retrograde. It's a great time to be, I think, just really formulating the plans and thinking about what you really want to initiate this next year.
A couple days from now, Mars and Gemini is going to make an interesting aspect of trying to Venus and Aquarius. I think that happens on the 9th or 10th of Monday. It's funny, I'm bringing Mars and Gemini. You know why I'm bringing this up, because we just sat and talked about Mercury for 20 minutes. And, you know, I think this Mars and Gemini retrograde cycle, or the ingress that happened in August, and we're retrograde, it's about to come to an end soon, at least the retrograde part. And, you know, I was already thinking about all the signs Mercury was in since August, since this cycle, Mars and Gemini happened. And, you know, to look to the dispositor of that, look to Mercury and the storyline that's going on with multiple Mercury stories because of it moving through signs. Again, that's something on a deeper level one can look at in their own chart, but I just thought I'd say that. But yeah, we got, again, this is kind of informal. We're bringing up some transits, but we have Mars-Venus here. It's happening here, which I think is great because it's a little bit of a break from some of the aspects we had in a year of aspects that are intense, eclipses in fixed signs, a Saturn in a fixed sign. There's a lot more other things, but we got, you know, Venus-Mars vibing. A little. I almost feel like I got this now in this conversation with you all, like this type of conversation that we're having, like Mars and Venus and air signs. So.
Yeah, it's definitely. You're right. That happens on January 9th, I believe. So it'll be 3 days later, basically on the 12th, that Mars will officially station direct. But when that trine happens between Venus and Mars, Mars is not really moving. So they're really brought together pretty quickly with the aspect, because Mars isn't really moving and Venus just kind of moves right through it. So Mars being an immutable sign in contrast to Mercury being in that cardinal sign, the Mars retrograde has more of that mutable vibe that we were just talking about, and you've definitely had to be adaptable. And being Mars retrograde in a mutable sign means there's multiple things going on at once that you have to attend to. There's probably been multiple new creative directions that you've maybe been inspired to pursue, but for one reason or another not be able to totally, fully commit to yet and totally make happen fully. And so I think the Venus coming through right now, the trine at Mars, is really beautiful in terms of thinking about, what is it that you do want to create, and what's like the desire of what you want to both attract into your life and really go after and make happen. And there's a nice harmony coming in there between them. At the same time, Mars is stationing to, start generating that forward momentum again.
Yeah, I think it's a really lovely lead into the station, Mars's station. Like, I think it feels really positive because we've had Mars in Gemini for a long time, and I feel like maybe a lot of us are feeling like this has been going on for a long time. So it's, we're coming to the end of the retrograde, and with Venus coming in to trine Mars, I feel like it's a lovely, like, sort of movement forward. Yeah.
Yeah,
a nice kickoff.
Yeah, and it's been rough, Mars and Gemini. I mean, I'm getting personal here because I'm a Gemini. I have major placements there. The station that happens, like you said, Gray, 8 degrees. It's not moving really fast. It's staying there for a little bit. Just so you know, on a side note, the end of May 30th was the new moon in Gemini, 9 degrees. I always think about that particular point in time because of the stationary degree point here that's happening with Mars and Gemini. I can go in my own personal life, and I have plotted out what's happened to me since then till now. I'll say it for the podcast. I have a 9-degree Mercury in Gemini, so I can see how this is played out, and I've had some amazing things happen and some really shitty things happen when it's come to types of conversations, but mostly on a serious note, my mental health and what's happened in the journey that I've been on. I'll never forget this Mars and Gemini transit. Can't believe I'm going to say this right now, but I'm getting to the place of being grateful for it. But I will say it has been very, very rough. And so I appreciate a little aspect like this that's happening for however it is, because I'm going back all the way till May, but even August, to think about, what has happened. Obviously, we've had some vibes going on with Mars-Saturn that is good, but we can't forget Mars-Neptune and all this that's happened, because we've had, Neptune and Pisces in the mutable sign affecting the Mars at different points here. And so I would hope anyone listening to this who's been paying attention to the Mars and Gemini transit, if it affected them, that we're at the end here, that you've pulled out some sort of piece of gold, or that there isn't a full-on scatteredness or a flakiness in your mind, that you've actually come to a place of like, oh, I'm in this one singular thought or place after all the thoughts, after the angry words, after the cutting and the severing of Mars in one's own mind, or maybe in certain situations in one's life, wherever Gemini is in their chart, that in a sense there is some sort of crystalline something. Crystalline is more of a Saturn word, but I think here when we were talking about Mercury for a lot of this podcast, and the place that we want to get to with Mercury really is a clear place. And I hope, not for myself, but just for everybody else in this stationary point, that one feels like they're starting to have the clearness in their brain and their thoughts come back to a centered place. I hope that makes sense, what I just said. So
I want to speak to the Mars transit when you mentioned scatteredness. So when at the beginning of the transit, so this Mars is transiting through my 6th house. And at the beginning, and in medical astrology, the 6th house is particularly important. And at the beginning, I decided to cut out coffee. And I really worked towards that to the point where I'm not, like maybe I'm having 1 coffee a week now. And I would recommend that for anyone, is, you know, if you're finding yourself particularly scattered during this period, cutting back on coffee and stimulants is, I think, for the rest of this transit, really beneficial.
Yeah, no, I'm digging that.
Yeah.
Dre, you drink coffee?
I do. I haven't quit coffee, but I've actually cut back on my coffee intake across this Mars retrograde to just having like 1 coffee a day, which is good for me.
Yeah,
I was having more than that before. So
you know, yeah, I again, with this particular transit, I thought for the end of 2022, I thought it was the biggest transit of the year personally, along with the eclipses. But I thought it was the biggest one of the year because of it being part of the eclipses at one point, being the ruler of the South Node. You know, there's so many things involving that's happened. Not to go back to 2022, but, you know, we are in the beginning here of January, and it's obviously culturally the sense of, like, renewal and wishing for things and stuff. But we're not completely done, you know. And there's something to bring up here with Mercury currently retrograde, Mars retrograde, Uranus is retrograde. In this particular month of January, what that is. Obviously, January 1st happens. Everyone's making wishes, and they want certain things to go. But the energy still hasn't completely, like, I feel, is moving forward in the physical world, but especially, I think, in one's mind, at least my mind. So, anyway, speaking to multiple retrograde planets. So
there's definitely seems more like a real gathering of resources and strategies and plans, and you can have some forward momentum now, but they're, like you're just referencing, at the end of January after Mercury stations direct around the 18th, and then there's a new moon on the 21st, and then Uranus stations on the 22nd. And then basically everything is moving direct for months until pretty late into April, when Mercury will eventually go retrograde in Taurus. So we end up having, like, you know, all of February, all of March, most of April, all the planets will be direct. So there's this actually really major forward movement coming in ahead after we get through this right now. Yeah, and
for those of you listening, I mentioned 2 special guests, but we actually have a third special guest here who might be noticing something outside and really like the shoelaces on my shoes. And which actually is a retrograde moment for me, of my shoelaces getting torn apart in a retrograde way. And I'm thinking about the drive I have to make home, and I'm going to have to, like, shoe with, like, 1 shoe on with no shoelaces. So yeah. No, it's all good. And so, speaking of that, though, you know, I basically was telling you before we started that I felt like that the new moon that was happening at 1 degree Aquarius, Venus, Saturn together, you know, and then it was, you looked it up, Gray, it was 25 degree or 25 hours later that Uranus was stationing.
Right.
So, Happy New Year, maybe, finally, right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We got a new moon, and let's remind them, because not everybody's running by January 1st is the new year, right? We're dealing with the lunar new year itself. Which for a lot of the world, that's actually when the new year starts. I mean,
and it will be the new year of the rabbit, the yin water rabbit, I believe, comes in right at that new moon as far as Chinese culture goes. And that is, you know, that time period leads into beginning of February is also, you know, sort of the time of Brigid, or sometimes people call it Candlemas. It's that cross-quarter day, which can really, I think, will be extremely powerful this year, because when we hit that cross-quarter day, we're really strongly actually emerging out of this period. There's going to be a lot of forward momentum coming after that point. But one thing I could just mention is, before we get to that new moon in Aquarius, one thing that is important is that Venus basically reactivates the Uranus Saturn square. And so it's very dynamic astrology in this next month, but following that new moon in Aquarius on February 5th is a very powerful Leo Leo full moon that is basically squaring Uranus and going to be opposing Saturn. And between now and the new moon, Venus goes through and sets off the Saturn-Uranus square. So we're in the final period of the Saturn-Uranus square that's been dominating astrology the past couple of years. And it's really going to be set off over the course of the next month for a final time. So it'll be interesting. There's probably going to be really major world events happening. I think personally, though, I really love the thing that's coming up right after Mars stations direct around the 14th. Venus will square Uranus, and I really love that aspect just because Uranus is in Taurus, so it's in Venus's sign. That can be a real kind of breakout moment to, Mars has just gone direct. Mercury will be helically rising and becoming visible right then. It's a really powerful time to, I think, get something really new and exciting, and what you're like most desiring to be excited about this year. Really getting that set in motion around that time, and hopefully some fun surprises and some good plot twists coming with that Venus-Uranus square. You never know what's going to happen, but
all depends on who you talk to. Somebody's got fixed angles, fixed planets, like if that's going to be fun or not, if they're in a current relationship story. And then here comes Uranus-Venus, which by degree is connected. You went all the way to February 5th and what was happening there, and it's all around the same degree. So another chapter. Yeah, hopefully it's fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, hopefully it's fun.
I'm going for fun.
It could be... It could be disruptive, but it could be real exciting. If you're not happy about your relationships and what's happening right now, it could be bringing something really exciting. So you never know.
No, good outlook to have, actually. Freshen things up, to come things from a different angle, to look at things and relating in different ways. It's there. Yeah, it's a square, so on and so forth, but squares in the end are there for a reason. Something needs to change. So it's just how it happens, and
it's dynamic.
Yes, thank you. You said dynamic, yes? I'm a type of astrologer in the end. I'm a Saturn astrologer, but in the end, I'm always looking at where Venus and Mars, how are they relating constantly in the chart. And, I'm bringing up the nodes, but what we've been dealing with eclipses. I find it fascinating that it's been a Mars-Venus story since we've had South Node, North Node, right? And then the nodes are going to change this year to Aries and Libra. It doesn't change. Mm-hmm. The Venus-Mars story is not changing. It's there, I think the oldest story going. It's Venus-Mars, relating or not relating, vibing or not. Anyway.
Yeah, I agree. I think the Venus-Mars cycle is hugely important, and one of the, I feel like most, doesn't get enough attention with all the plethora of astrological discourse that is going on now around social media. That Venus-Mars cycle is so hugely important. I didn't actually realize it was until I started writing about transits, and I very quickly, within like the first year of writing a blog, was like just became a really firm believer in how important that Venus-Mars cycle is. In charts, but also just by transit. So like hitting the trine, like we were just talking about, is really important. Later, Venus will go into Pisces, and we'll get a Venus-Pisces squaring that Mars and Gemini, and that will also be really important to pay attention to.
My brain is somewhere right now. Do I say what's really on my mind?
Yeah.
What are you guys reading right now? Genie, what are you reading these days?
About 10 books.
10 books? Pick one.
I'm in the middle of researching, so I have a whole... The book I read last, so the book I was reading last night, Hermetica, so... Yeah, but I'm actually reading a lot of books at the moment. So.
Okay.
Haven't you been researching a bit of Enki and Ea and the
Yeah,
relationship with Inanna and Ishtar.
That's true. Yeah. Yeah.
And that's interesting just because Saturn is really near the fixed star Deneb Algedi that often gets associated with Enki and Ea. And later around that new moon, we're going to have a Venus-Saturn conjunction really close to the degree of Deneb Algedi.
Within 1 degree of Deneb Algedi, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and
Hold up. I'm going to play like I don't know anything.
Oh.
Genie? And this is
So Deneb Algedi is the fixed star in the tail of the Capricornus constellation. Mm-hmm. It's one of the Behenan fixed stars, so that's one of the magical fixed stars. And the fixed stars are called fixed because, unlike the planets, they're not constantly moving. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. No, thank you, because just people are going to want to know. What's that website that's really accessible? Is it Constellation of Words?
Constellation of Words.
Yeah,
look up Constellation of Words because then you'll see some basic definitions that are taken from different sources there, and you can learn a little bit, and they'll have the visual too there since we're talking about fixed stars. So I just want to stop there. I know there'll be people like, what? And now I know they're going to look it up.
Yeah.
So anyway, I asked you originally what you were reading, and Gray referenced some things you were researching, and he referenced a particular...
Yeah, so...
You're grabbing something. You can't see right now, but she's grabbing a couple books here.
Particularly for star lore, Bernadette Brady's books.
Mm-hmm.
She has a couple of fixed stars that are particularly... they're Bibles.
Mm-hmm.
But also the Babylonian star lore by Gavin White is particularly interesting because it takes the star lore back to the Mesopotamian times.
Mm-hmm.
So we get to look at the stars through the Mesopotamian lens, and a lot of the information that is in here was translated from the cuneiform tablets, which is the clay tablets that were written in cuneiform.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
that's a sneaky book there because there's the typical books we see on fixed stars, but fixed star information is actually hard to come by, and it's like unfulfilled or something. But that particular book was recommended to me. I think Ryan Butler, for those. Anyway, he digs that book. I dig that book because of the different angle it comes from. And I think there's so much information there. It fills in the blanks, from the other resources on fixed stars that you typically see. So,
and so Deneb Algedi is the star that's in the tail of the sea goat. So we're talking about the Capricorn constellation in the sky. So because of precession and, if we're going to switch the tropical zodiac to the sidereal zodiac, we end up with that 23 Aquarius going back to it's kind of like literally the tail end of Capricorn going into Aquarius. And so Saturn, if you see it in the sky, it's fairly close in the sky to that the where Deneb Algedi is in the tail of the
projected
of the
degree anyway.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But you can still sort of see in the general area, just like you can sort of see Mars up above Aldebaran right now. I mean, they're not exactly next to each other, but
they're close.
Yeah.
Gray. She said 10 books.
Okay.
What about
interestingly, one book I was reading recently is a book called Pan, about Pan, which is interesting because Pan is sort of one of the Greek myths that goes in with the constellation of Capricorn, where Mercury in the tropical zodiac is retrograde right now. And that constellation story is when the Typhon, the great monster of all monsters in the war between the Olympians and the Titans, was coming out to basically sort of devastate and turn the tide in favor of the Titans. And the gods were afraid of the Typhon, and it's said that Pan had the idea for them to leap into the water, the river, and transfigure themselves, and turned into getting that sea goat tail. The Pisces constellation is Aphrodite and Eros, who did the same thing. They leapt into the river and turned into fish. in that moment. But when it's Babylonian star lore, that star in Denebel Gedi, you'll see it linked to, I guess, different figures. But the Babylonian god Ea or Enki is a figure that is often associated with that. And he is, interestingly, also sometimes associated, they say, with Mercury in that Babylonian cosmology. But he's sort of this very wise trickster.
He's a god of craft and wisdom, and he taught civilization to humanity. So he's very benefic to human. Like, he was, out of all the spirits that there are, all of the entities that we can reach out to, I feel like these entities that exist within our mythologies that are particularly helpful to humanity are the kind of entities we should be reaching out to, because there is a history of connection to humanity. And so he taught civilization to humans. And
sort of similarly in fixed star magic, with that Bohemian list, that particular star, if you work with it, it is supposed to be very good for just general wealth and kind of protection of wealth or assets, as well as the legal system, and not just like the human created legal system and being able to work through that, but also sort of, I think of also like metaphysical laws and things like that, because he's one of these primal, like he's from the depths, the watery depths, and kind of emerges out of the subterranean waters and sort of brings about a reordering of civilizations and laws and that kind of thing.
And also it's interesting with right now Saturn is conjunct Denebel Gedi, and then Saturn and Venus will be conjunct Denebel Gedi. And it's interesting in the story of Enki. So Inanna, if you know Inanna, she's Venus. She's the Mesopotamian Venus. So Enki actually gave Inanna his mise, which is, I guess, all his powers. So Inanna and Enki have a close relationship. So it's going to be interesting with this sort of this planetary.
She kind of did a bit of a Venus move of, I think, getting him drunk.
She did. She got him drunk
too, right? Yeah.
She got Enki drunk on beer. So I recommend, like, as an offering, beer is a good offering. She got him drunk on beer and convinced him to give her all his powers, which he did. But then she ended up in the underworld, if you know the story of Inanna's descent. And it was actually Enki. She
sort of gives up those as she's descending.
She had to give up all her mise as she was descending, so she was left powerless, and she was killed in the underworld. So she was hung on a meat hook, dead, and her, I guess, handmaiden went to all the gods and asked all the gods to assist to bring her back to life, and Enki was the only one that would assist. So he fashioned these little, I guess they were little insects, out of his fingernails and sent them down into the underworld, and they revived her. So there's this beautiful connection between Enki and Venus.
And wait, Enki and the other name of
Inanna.
Yeah, just to be clear.
Yeah.
It's like one of the oldest stories going around, like, get him drunk, get his powers. He doesn't seem too phased. He's coming back to help her out. He's like, so I think there was more than that's happened, but obviously he's, cared for this person. But anyway, I'm joking, but it's just for those listening, it's the same shit's been happening over and over again. Someone's handing a potion in the beer and he has powers. I asked you, both of you, about the books you're reading, and I actually find it fascinating. That's where we ended up to, because it's connections of current transits going on. I've been looking at this book. I got a bunch of books too, but on purpose, I've been like, beginning of the year, put them off to the side. I've been doing a lot of research on Hermes again. I just need to refilm it, just get acquainted with certain things, something that I'm working on for something else. But I recently I learned about this book called The Interpretation of Dreams. You can find it under the World Oxford little book section there. And the book is so mind-blowing. You know, back then, dreams were actual spirit, or like it came to people. It's a separate thing, and came through people. And there was usually somebody around in the village or in the community that's job was to interpret the dreams. And, you know, it was divinatory, you know, the way it was looked upon within culture back then. So anyway, this book, I'm just learning a little bit about it. But it's made me look at my dreams differently because I've done a lot of dream work in certain parts of my life. But this book and its translation of certain dreams is like to the numbers of things. Like, you know, you saw 2 of these in your dreams. This means in 2 days, this is going to happen. Now, obviously, it's related to crops or marriage or sex and deviant sex. It's really weird, this book. But the coolest thing about it is how dreams were looked upon as like spirit. And how they would enter you, to give you, to show you. And I feel very connected to that because I think normally with dreams, you have, my dreams. Like you're seeing things. But if you actually start to think like you're sleeping and you're on your bed and the spirit is entering you, like it's coming through you to do whatever it has to do, you know. The other part of it is, you know, giving you your fate. The fates, like revealing things to you in your dreams, even though when you wake up, it's not revealed to you, but it's like inside you now. It's like around there. It sounds really creepy at the same time. If you're looking at it as a thing of like this, I'm having these dreams. I don't know exactly what happened. I have a feeling of this. It leads you down a whole, like a path of trying to find out what it is as best as you can in the waking world. And that, you know, it's inside you in the sense, you know, the dreams inside you, you know, the answers are inside you. And so that's the way I've been looking at it lately, because dreams my whole life have been so huge and I don't sleep because of them. You know how you talk to people and they're like, did you dream about anything last night? And they're like, they have a dream they remember once every 2 months or some shit. And for me, it's multiple things every night since I was a kid. And I don't sleep because of it. And as of late, the last year and a half, it's been so deep and so intense that I've done other things, other tools I brought in to help me, writing them down, talking to a recorder, mumbling in the middle of the night. But this particular book, not that I'm going off the translations and saying what the book's going to say, like this is what's going to happen, but just my outlook on my dreams, how now there's a spirit that comes to me every night and comes into me and is saying things or showing me things. And I almost feel like now I have another level of something going on with me, like up the level with the way I'm connecting with myself and the way I see or I'm trying to understand or decipher my dreams. It doesn't seem so separate anymore as something you're looking at from the outside. It's more like it's inside of me, like it's in me. And so when I'm walking around during the day, I'm not done with the dream. It's always there, and it always will be, and it's constantly going. So that's actually a lot to accept. That's a lot to accept, and to walk through that door like I have. Now I am seeing everything slightly differently. Like there's a little different filter on my waking world, and it's to the point where, you know, I don't drink or do certain things or whatever, but I sometimes feel like I'm high, like I feel like I'm seeing things. And literally seeing things at times. And I almost feel like the spirits or ghosts or angels, I will say more angels because I'm more into angels and I do work with angels, that I'm actually seeing them. I can't believe I'm talking about this right now because I haven't talked to anybody about this particular parts, but that's what I'm doing right now. But that's the book. Angelo Niosis is a Greek guy, Greek tarot card reader. He's got, I think, a PhD in history and stuff. Greek guy. He turned me on to this book. I was at a tarot conference. He talked about it. I didn't get to see it, but he turned me on to this book, and I just gone down the rabbit hole with it. So that's what it. That's the only book I've been paying attention to because it's just like more than enough right now.
That's really interesting. I think like again, going back to we live in a really diurnal society. Like I think we were more connected to our dreaming life as being not separate to us, as being a part of us. And I think that was fairly recent. Like I feel like maybe the Industrial Revolution was the point in time, or the Enlightenment, something like that was a point in time when we started to separate from that. But I don't think it's not. I think it's the natural state to be in, where you're connected to your dreaming self, and your dreaming self is integrated into your waking self. And I think lights, they're this. And it's not just me thinking, this is what people have said, like I've read about this, that the invention of lights is what has really kind of created that separation, because before we had lights, we existed more within the liminal states. So we would spend a lot of time under candlelight in this sort of, these in-between spaces between, between the realms. And now we're very much like, we're living in these bright rooms, and then we switch off the light and we go to sleep. And so we're going between this bright day like existence into just pitch black night, and we don't spend much time in these in-between spaces anymore. So we're losing connection. We've really separated the two worlds of dreaming and waking. And I don't think that's natural. And I think connecting to your dreams is natural. That's the natural state to be in. Yeah.
I just think it's funny that, we block out the night by turning on the light, basically artificial light. For some reason, I'm thinking of Richard Tarnas's book, Cosmos and Psyche, for those out there who know it, the dense book that it is. There's a graphic actually in there, but this is a talk about the beginning of Western civilization part here, where the thing, actually, when Copernicus, changed the whole model, and it led to a thing of like human beings looking at something from the outside. You could say a scientific point of view, like you're separating yourself, where everything kind of before was integrated as one, right? So there's many benefits from looking at things from the outside. We wouldn't be able to do this podcast right now with technology because of it, all this other stuff. You go on and on with this type of stuff. But byproduct is this separation of like being completely intertwined with everything, and instead of separating and looking at everything from the outside and analyzing it, and then the journey of trying to, once you analyze, you can drive yourself crazy. In the end, we're all trying to get back into the womb. Okay, we come out of the womb, we're trying to get back into the womb. It's the same shit. It's like you're trying to get back, you analyze, and in the end, like on a deep spiritual level, heart level, organic level, you're just trying to get back to the source the whole time. So again, this goes back to what you're saying about the separateness, and anyway. So
yeah,
and right now is a visual cue. I'm looking over at Gray's on the other side of the table, and he's got this certain smile on his face. He's just kind of looking at me. So Gray, what's on your mind? Where do you want to go next? You want to go next? What do you want to do?
Well, I just think that's a great topic for what's going on with the astrology this next couple of weeks, especially the next couple of weeks, especially the next 10 days or so, with Mars stationing direct followed by Mercury stationing direct. I think it's a great time to really pay attention to your dreams, and there being really important insights and messages that can come up through that. And yeah, it sounds like what you're doing when you just really exploring the symbolism and exploring the meaning. And yeah, because there could be whether those are angelic or spirit or whatever it is, important messages coming through. I don't think I'm the only one.
No, you're definitely not.
Yep.
And also maybe there's a possibility that you're actually going somewhere else as well, not just something's coming to you. You could be.
Yeah, no. It's interesting you say that, because that's part of the deal.
Yeah.
It's that feeling.
Yeah.
And I haven't had that feeling in a while.
Yeah.
But that's all I can say to that. I am going somewhere else. There's something happening.
Yeah.
So Anyway, that's all I can say to that. I'm willing to say to that. Some things you just have to keep secret and mysterious. So, I don't know. Do I have anything else on your mind? And we can always keep talking and stuff. I don't know. We just kind of went with it.
We covered some good topics.
Did good.
Yeah, we did. And we kind of went this in the rough, sort of put together, structured way with a couple things. I didn't know what was going to happen, but that's exactly what I wanted to happen. Was just kind of go with it, and hopefully, those of you listening connected with something, picked up something. As always, a lot of the things that are referenced in the podcast I always put links into the bio, into the transcripts, whether it's in the YouTube bio or on podcast bio. I'm going to put things there. I hope you guys can hear that. It's definitely the end of the podcast. Put the mic closer. Let's see if we can get the sound effects and people can catch that. But saying that, yeah, let's end it up here. Okay, let's get down to like the business part of it here, the legit stuff. Gray Crawford. Where can people find you? Know more about you?
Yeah, graycrawford.net, GRAY Crawford.net, and there is also a new YouTube channel I've created, Gray Crawford Astrology. It's at Gray Crawford Astrology on YouTube. So far, it is me reading my written articles that are already on my website, because that's just something people have asked me to do for a while, and I decided to make a YouTube channel, just put them there. But there will be... you should subscribe that, because in the months ahead, I'm going to do plural, hopefully within the month, but definitely within the months ahead, there'll also be like me interviewing people and some other videos that will be showing up there. And I also have a Patreon that you can find through my site as well as my YouTube channel. Mm-hmm. And actually, as part of that Patreon, I should add, there's a few tiers. There's one lower level, you get access to my writing and some extra videos that I make that I don't actually make public on YouTube. And then there is a $9 level where I do a monthly meeting around a new moon, and it's like a gathering of people that we just kind of look at charts and talk about what's going on. And then there's a higher level, the Oak tier, which is $20 a month, and that is an actual focus class that happens every month, roughly around the full moon. And Genie is now going to be joining me on that, and we're going to be going through talking about fixed stars and the mythology of fixed stars, as well as how to work magically with fixed stars.
Yeah,
so you should check that out if you're interested.
Yeah. And I'm Genie, which you already know. And you can find me at, I'm a gold and silversmith, and I primarily make astrological talismans. Previously, I was Psychic Desert, but now, since moving to my Neptune line, I am honoring the celestial spirits, the spirits of the celestial seas, by changing my name to Tides of Tethys, and you can find me at tidesoftethys.com, and also on my Instagram, Tides of Tethys, and also I am making astrological talismanic prints, lino prints, relief printing, and that is just on Instagram at the moment at Sirens of the Spheres.
Sweet. I have one of those prints.
You do?
I do. It's beautiful.
Thank you.
And I'm going to stay mysterious here because I've seen some other work of yours in another print, and I can't talk about it. Yes. We have to let the viewers imagine, but already, I will say the print that I have, it's a Saturn print that you did.
Saturn Aquarius.
Yeah, and it's beautiful, and it's definitely a part of my world where I'm doing my creating in a small attic, where I do my videos for my YouTube channel, under Sparkles of Gold Astrology, where I do my podcasts, where I do talk to those angels I mentioned earlier in the attic for the last year in Portland, Oregon, amongst other things that have happened to me in that space. You can find more of my stuff at sparklesofgold.com. You'll see, what I have to offer for one-on-one readings, to my podcast, to blog posts. I also, as I mentioned earlier, I like to put links up to things that are mentioned up to whether I'm talking about myself or anybody else on the podcast. January 11th, if you happen to hear this before then, which means do I have to do this before then? Maybe in the next 24 hours I put this podcast out. I think I'm going to do it. I'll work late. Is a Wednesday. I think I'm going to go live on YouTube to do my second official live stream call-in show. People get to call in. I put a number on the screen, and I'll do their chart live. It's kind of old school, and I love it. And I already have had interesting things happen because of it. I have other things I'm working on tech-wise that I'm going to bring into these live streams that are a little bit of fun, and hopefully down the line kind of mess with people in a good way and shake things up a little bit. So I'm pretty much at 960 subscribers on YouTube. I'd like to get to 1,000 by the end of this week. I think it's going to happen. I need some more watch hours to hit a magical place on YouTube where things open up for me. I know that's a goal here for you too, Gray. That's going to happen for you. It will. And so that's what's up with me. That's what's up. And so thank you for both of you for doing this on the fly and chatting and talking. Maybe we could do it again sometime. So.
Hey, with mutable Mercuries, that's what we're all about.
Yeah. Definitely. Thanks, Nicholas.
Yeah, I love being in gangs and crews, and I think the mutable Mercuries now.
Yeah, I like this one.
Yeah, I like this one too. There's another one that I've come up with that I can't say publicly right now. These two on the podcast know is my other gang. Mm-hmm. It's a serious gang though too. It's not one to be messed with. Mm-hmm. Just like mutable Mercury is not be one to be messed with. Okay, because we could shift, bob, and weave.
Yeah.
So don't mess with us.
Yeah.
Don't play. Okay. So anyway, for all you listening, thanks for listening to this podcast, for joining, and I'll see you on the next one.